So today the ds-incubator continues with the series about building shiny apps, and I'm very excited to maybe the first time talk about something fun, at least fun to me, which is the idea of workflow. How you actually go about developing an application. And the topics that we're going to be covering today come mostly from chapter 5 of Mastering Shiny, although that chapter includes some topics about debugging and reprexes that we are not going to be talking about today. We're going to reserve those topics for another meetup. And then the idea of workflow is also covered in chapter 20, but in more depth. Not sure if we're going to get to that, but if we do, then we're going to be covering only section 20.2.1, which is talking specifically about the workflow for building shiny apps when they are part of an app package, and just basically keyboard shortcuts that you do when you have a package as other than just a normal project. But that's kind of depending on time. More than anything, I'd like to cover what I'm highlighting here. Can I check maybe with a verbal yes if you can see my screen and that I'm highlighting 4 items in blue?
Yes.
Thanks, guys. So good. Okay, so the very first thing that the book covers, and I think is cool to notice, is that RStudio itself helps you build shiny apps by providing you with some templates. For example, we can go to the files menu, we can create a new project, and among the list of things that we have here, we can choose a new directory if you're going to build an entirely new project for this shiny app, and we can choose shiny web application. So that will give, now we say something like ABC, whatever name we want, and we choose where to put it, and that will create the bare bones kind of project, including a demo of an app that then you're supposed to adapt to make it your own app. So the thing that I like from this approach, this is taking a while and I'll fill the time with the explanation. The thing that I like from this approach is that it's very easy to get an RStudio project, an app.r file that defines the app, and a file that is a .gitignore that already ignores some things that usually you don't want to include in Git. But then the downside is, to me, is that the template that it provides is quite complex to my taste. So I like more than getting a lot of stuff that then I have to remove and then to inject what I actually want. I prefer something that is even more minimal. So if I run this app, I'm now here in this new project that I created with the RStudio menu. I have here this run app button. If I click there, at least I will be able to visualize something functional, and that's fine mostly when it's your first app or the first few apps and you don't really know much about what goes in an app. But for example, the stage in which I am now, which is kind of more or less intermediate, I already know more or less what I want, and then having to come here and delete the contents of the UI and then delete the contents of the server is a bit annoying to me. So instead I prefer another approach, which is the idea of using the creating the project myself, creating an app.r file, and instead using a snippet. A snippet is these things that RStudio include that have a name associated to them. So I start typing shiny, I don't even complete the word, and I already see that there is a bunch of things with a blue label that are functions that come from the package shiny in this particular case. But also at the very top, I see an icon that is white, and that's the icon for the snippet. So if I now hit tab, what will happen is that snippet will kind of manifest itself and will populate this before empty file now with the skeleton of a shiny app. So I like that approach better because that gives me more clearly the structure of an app, the UI, the server, and the call to shiny app that uses that UI and that server, and then I start filling the details. So that's kind of my preferred approach just now. And my workflow again changes as I develop more apps and realize, oh, I could do this, I could do that, and I like this better now than I didn't like before. So now with this, I'm gonna close this app and close this project and go back to the main project that I'm using for this series of meetups. And I'm gonna basically build on top of that. Where is that project? DS Shiny. I'm gonna start building a very small app that I think you saw before in other meetups, and I'm gonna be covering other aspects of the workflow. So the very first aspect that we cover already is this idea that you can use templates, either from to create a whole project that is a Shiny app, or if you do the project yourself, you can create a bare bones Shiny app with this snippet. So now the second topic I'm gonna be covering is more the idea of, okay, if every time that I do a change, I need to go and click that run app button. It doesn't sound like that, but eventually it gets very annoying because we change our app very frequently. So we want to probably develop a workflow that includes some keyword shortcuts that do run that app, and that we quickly see what's the result of our latest change on the viewer. One thing to give you the heads up is that debugging Shiny apps is a bit more complicated than debugging normal R code, meaning that it is useful to have very quick feedback as soon as we change something. In this context, having a very good workflow that feels really fluid is key to catch the problems before they become like a whole mess that we don't know even when we introduce the problems. Okay, so this is the bare bones Shiny app, now adapted to include a very small app. So I'm using here a text input function to allow the user to introduce their name, and then I'm outputting a message that is the combination of the string hello with the name that the user provides. So before we run this button, run app, and I'm going to be exploring this drop-down menu in a second. Notice that one thing that is highlighted here is that the app will run in the viewer panel. So here in my viewer, I will soon see the app. And also that in this section, it says that the app will run on the console. So let's see what that actually means. Now, instead of clicking run app, I'm going to run the app using a keyboard shortcut to introduce you to my favorite workflow. And because I already have the whole app in one file, I can press Shift, Control, and Enter, and that will source the file. So by doing so, the app will actually run in the same way that it would run if I had clicked that button. And also notice how the button changed from run app to reload app. And that's important because now my workflow includes making changes to the app and then again pressing the same keyword shortcut that will reload the app. And the changes that I do should manifest themselves on the viewer. So, for example, notice how the label of the place where the user should input their name, in this case I'm going to say Mauro, the label is name ? So let's change that to say something like, what's your name? So the file hasn't been saved yet. I could not even save it. I could press Shift, Control, Enter, and that should pop up this window to tell me asking me if I want to save the file. And now it's an Enter to save the file, and at the same time it's reloading the app. So once again, my workflow was make a change, press Shift, Control, Enter, then accept to save the file, and that automatically expresses that change directly on the viewer. So very quickly I can see the effect of what I'm doing. Alternatively, I could say that I want to capitalize the message here so that everything is like in title case. Instead of pressing Shift, Control, Enter right away, I could do Control S to save the file. So now if I do Shift, Control, Enter, I won't be asked for confirmation with that pop-up, which I find a little annoying. And immediately the app reloads. So with this, we are learning a new workflow where we don't even use the mouse. We are just running the app with by sourcing the file with Shift Control Enter. Then we are doing changes as we wish, and then whenever we are ready, we hit Control Save and then Shift Control Enter, and that shows the updated app already on the viewer. So other options that we have is to see, in terms of the viewer, it's to see the app on a panel as we did before. So let's stop this app, and one way in which you can stop it is clicking here. But again, if you are more fond of the keyboard, then you could press Ctrl 2 to move the focus to the console, and then Escape. Escape will terminate the interrupt R and stop the application. So now let's see what happens if we click here, run on a window or run external. So if I click run on a window, what we'll do, Shift Control Enter, is that the app will run in a window, which I don't see because it might be hidden here. There you go. That's the app window, right? And what happens if we click on the run external is the same thing that we get when we click here in open in browser, which basically shows us the result the closest to what the user will experience, because that's on the web browser where they will see it, or even their phones, right? So same thing, we can say Mauro, and now the browser gives me actually auto-completion from other strings that may have recorded somewhere. That's pretty cool, I like that. All right, so the one thing that is sometimes annoying is that when a Shiny app runs, the console is not available. So if I run this app, let's do it here on the viewer, so it's kind of easier to see. Let's run it here on the viewer panel. So by the way, you can also run something on the viewer saying RStudio API, which is the package that RStudio API, we can use the function viewer with a URL here, and that will make the app that is running in that URL appear here on the viewer, but without clicking any button, just with code. And we'll see when that is useful in just a moment. So for now, let's just remove that. So what I wanted to kind of stress now is that, and I'm gonna make sure that the app is running here on the viewer panel so we can see quickly, easier. I'm gonna press Shift Control Enter once again to run the app. And notice how the console is now busy, right? So I cannot do, say, if I want to do 1+1, I hit Enter and nothing really happens because the console is busy, right? And that's not great, because sometimes you want to do, use that console for other purposes while the app is running. So the solution to that, there is a couple of solutions. Let's start with the simplest one, the one that is most integrated with RStudio, which is to immediately click here to run a job in the background. So instead of choosing the console, you choose the background job to be, hosting that or serving that app. So now if I do the same, Shift Control Enter, notice how we see something similar to what we saw before, except that the panel that is serving that app is no longer the console, but the panel jobs. We still get a URL that we could use to paste on the browser if we wanted, and we see the app running here on the viewer. So that's pretty cool. I also get the reload app button here. So what, let's say that we want to change the message and see that quickly express what is your name. I'm gonna hit Control S to save, and Shift Control Enter to reload. So that I expect, there you go, that will be expressed on the viewer. So quite quickly, this workflow running, the job on the background is kind of similar to running it on the console, except that I have a console that is functional, and I can now do 1+1 and get what I want, which is 2. Okay, that is pretty good with me, and I think it's very nicely integrated with RStudio, so I would recommend that workflow. The only thing that I noticed while I was preparing for this meetup is that when you go to the list of jobs that are running, for every change that you did, and every time you send, you press that reload app, you get a new job running in the background. I'm not very sure how much that would be a problem if you're running, a heavy app and you did, like 3, 5, 10, 20, 50 updates to it, and you have all these jobs running, maybe it can be a problem. So there is one other approach that you could use to run not a new job every time you reload the app, but instead a single job and kind of overwrite that job every single time. And that's the topic that I'm going to be covering next, before making it pause and asking for questions and comments. So let's stop everything. So by the way, one way in which you can quickly stop all those jobs is simply by restarting R. So that's what I'm going to do now, pressing the keyboard shortcut Shift Control F10. As you can see, the highlighted button is terminate job, so I should be able to press enter, and that will restart R, hopefully. Let's see, maybe I should click it there, terminate jobs. Let's see what I get in the console if R is restarting, and I expected the jobs to kind of cleanse. I don't know why they are going to still, maybe the jobs are still kind of closing, or I don't know. That's not what I expected. I expected that the restarting would finish them. But instead, let's see if session restart R is what I did before. Let's see if terminate R closes there. Which I want to terminate? Yes. In previous runs, I did get a pop-up that was confirming that I had some open jobs and asked me to confirm that I wanted to close them as I restarted our session. So I'm not sure if this session in particular is kind of stuck, but well, in any case, that probably highlights the need for maybe an approach that kind of scales up better when you have multiple apps, or your apps are bigger. So, and that's something I would like to cover, is because it's not so. I saw it documented in the book, in Mastering Shiny, but it took me a while to kind of get it work. So I want to capture it here in this video in case I forget later how to do it, or in case someone else is also struggling to set that up. And the magic is all driven by a single file that you put at the root of the project, and you can call it whatever. I decided to call it auto reload. So this is the file. It's very simple. All it does is sets the option shiny.autoreload to true, and then calls shiny run app. So if the app is hosted in a file called add.r at the root of the project as well, kind of alongside the autoreload file, then I don't need to pass any argument to run app. But you will see in the head file of run app that the first argument is get working directory, meaning that if you want to run an app that is in a different directory, then you will need to pass some arguments here. But for this particular example, I am using an app that is hosted alongside the autoreload file, so this file should work. So what you do to run this background job and make all apps overwrite themselves in a single job so that the jobs don't pile up is, you create this file, and then you go to jobs manually yourself and you start a local job. If you do that with the active file selected on the auto-reload file that you just created, that file will automatically be populated here on the menu. Otherwise, you browse the file that you want. And the defaults usually are fine because you want to work from that working directory in this case. So I'm going to simply hit start, and that will start a new job. And it's going to be a single job. It's going to emit also this URL that I'm going to copy here, because notice how the viewer is not showing the app. So if you want the viewer to show the app, then what you can do is you can do RStudio API viewer view. No, that's not what I want. Viewer. There you go. And you pass the URL that you got from the job. So with that, the app will display there. You can use it as you normally do. And notice that if we go to the file app and we do the changes that we want, say we go back to a simpler phrase, let's say your name please. Let's see, if I save it, immediately just by saving it, it updates. I don't even need to do Shift Control Enter. I don't need to resource the file. So any change that I do to the app that is saved, so I do the change, I press Control S, and that immediately reflects on the viewer or wherever you are browsing that app. And the one last thing is to confirm that if I go to jobs and backtrack here, there's only one job. So each of the changes that I did not trigger a new job because I wasn't resourcing the app. I was just saving it, right? Saving that file, and that file is continuously being read by this background job. Okay, so those are a few tricks that are not super or not very commonly documented. Some tricks that I found pretty cool and that I found documented in the book Mastering Shiny. Those are the main things I think I wanted to cover today. Let me see if I'm missing something crucial while you make the comments or questions that you may have. So go ahead and let me know what questions and comments you have.
I don't really have a question, but I think that's actually really helpful. If I were to work on an app again, I would try to use that workflow like that.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to see the changes happen right away on the app. That's my personal experience. And again, because debugging Shiny is so hard, at least not until I don't think it's gonna get any easier until I become more experienced in building Shiny apps. Is that I want to see like feedback super quick. The one thing we're going to be talking about later is that when we build a more complex app, then the infrastructure of an R package is extremely helpful too. And that also gives us a new workflow, the workflow that we already used to when we build packages, the load all function to source all the R functions. We're going to have, RCMD check. Those are great things that the package workflow gives us. We're going to be talking about that later. But the one thing that breaks is this one last trick that I showed when you create an auto reload file that just by saving the file, updates the app. That I didn't get to work, and I don't know if it does work. But anyway, so basically there is this maybe two workflows. When you begin the app, you may create that auto reload file to very quickly have a draft of what you want to build, and then once you know what you want, then you kind of move to the more featured workflow of the R package, and you have to kind of drop the auto reload approach. Any other comments there or questions? No. Okay, cool. All right, then. Thanks a lot for joining today. We'll be following up next meetup also with more of these kinds of things, a bit more live. Before we were talking too much about theory, and I felt that it got a little boring. Maybe that's why we are so few today. but yeah. Thanks a lot for joining me, and see you next time.
Thanks, Mauro.
Ciao, ciao.
Thanks.